O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Amen. Well, there are times in our lives when everything changes. One simple turn or twist, and the whole world is different. There is that phone call you receive in the middle of the night to tell you tragic news. The call that says someone you love has died and your life will be forever changed. Before the call, you are one person. After the call, you are someone else. There are also moments when good news is delivered. You open a letter that says you have been accepted into college or graduate school. I remember when I opened the letter accepting me into Eden Seminary. At that moment, I became someone different. I became a seminary student. On August 21st, 2017, I received the news that I had become a grandfather. And I remember vividly where I was when I received the call from the chair of the search committee at Columbia United Church of Christ with the news that after 3 very good interviews, they were going to recommend me to the congregation to be your next pastor. Moments like this are life-changing, and by definition, they can also be challenging. My thoughts when I was accepted into Eden Seminary's master's degree program were filled with doubt. Not about my call, not about God's movement in my life, but about my own ability. Would I be able to accomplish this task? Would I be able to finish this program? After having been out of school for 10 years, did I really have the skills necessary to go back? After receiving the news that I would be recommended to the congregation here as your next pastor, the changes were a bit daunting as well. Making a new life in a new community, finding a house, uprooting my family, establishing myself in a new congregation. These are all challenging and scary tasks. Was I up to this? Would I have the skills necessary to do what needed to be done? Life can change in an instant. One moment you are a father, the next moment you're a grandfather. One moment you're working in sales, the next moment you're a seminary student. One moment you're a pastor of one church, the next moment you're headed to a new church and a new life. One moment you're an insignificant shepherd standing on a hillside and doing a job that is without honor or distinction, and the next moment you're a prophet. Well, this is what happened in our gospel lesson today. One moment, these shepherds were tending their flocks in the fields, minding their own business, and watching their sheep. And the next moment, the heavens broke loose with angelic messengers proclaiming the advent of the Messiah. In that instance, with that divine communication, they became something they were not before. They became prophetic instruments of God's joyful news, tasked with the proclamation of the birth of the Messiah. They became instruments of God's grace, vehicles of God's salvation. The Annunciation to the shepherds has become quite the subject of artistic interpretation. You see this as the subject featured on Christmas cards. You certainly hear it in songs, and you see decorations of the shepherds. In the 9th century, the Annunciation to the shepherds became a popular focus of pre-Renaissance art. Poets and authors have written pieces reflecting on this incident, and philosophers have mused about the occasion for 2,000 years. They elevate the role of shepherd to honored status in the hierarchy of pastoral vocation. But in Jesus' day, shepherds would not have been perceived as likely recipients of angelic annunciation. Shepherds were not regarded very highly in Jesus' day, and the very act of bringing this proclamation to lowly shepherds was kind of a scandal. Over the 1800 years of the history of the Jewish people at that time, shepherding had gone from a family function, as it was for Abraham and King David, to a function that was hired out to the lower rungs of society. Aristotle once wrote that shepherds were the laziest among people. They lead an idle life and they get their subsistence without trouble from tame animals. Aristotle concluded that shepherding was an easy job without much honor, a lazy job because of the nature of the animals involved. The viewpoint in Israel of the religious leaders was similar to Aristotle's. Taxonomy was paramount in their cleanliness codes, and shepherds were not liturgically pure or clean. They were unclean because they basically lived with the animals that they were keeping. Good and proper Jews did not spend their days and nights sleeping in the outdoors with animals. Animals were kept in their place, and people were kept in their place. A place for everything and everything in its place. By the nature of their very job, shepherds were considered unclean. Now, considering how the role of shepherd had changed in the 1,000 years between King David and Jesus, it would have been quite scandalous to the recipients of this angelic message of the good news. And yet, that's what we found here in today's gospel, a scandal. The angels appear in the heavens, and the shepherds are terrified. But the angel of the Lord tells them, "Do not be afraid, for see, I am bringing you good news of great joy for all people. To you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, who is the Messiah." Suddenly the heavens were filled with angels singing of God's glory. The only witnesses, these shepherds, who were deemed worthless by society. Well, you know, the author of the Gospel of Luke is unique in mentioning these shepherds. The author of the Gospel attributed to Matthew doesn't mention them at all, and the authors of the Gospels attributed to Mark and John say nothing about Jesus' birth. They just jump in with him as an adult. So shepherds are only mentioned in Luke's account of the birth of Jesus, written 85 years after the event took place. Why did Jesus alone mention the shepherds? What was the significance of this event in the context of Luke's infancy narrative? I think there are three main points that Luke was trying to bring to the table that we can glean from this story and how that moment changed the lives of these shepherds forever. Well, the shepherds received this message of good news that was not given to the rich and powerful, but to the meek and lowly. The shepherds believed. They boldly followed their faith, and they found Jesus. And the shepherds prophetically proclaimed the good news once they left the manger, and all who heard it were amazed at what the shepherds told them. The first is receiving. The second is believing. The third is proclaiming. This formula worked well for the shepherds, and it works well for us today as well. Let's talk first about receiving. There is much to be made of the fact that in Luke's gospel, the angelic messengers did not proclaim this good news to kings and rulers or even the religious elite. They shared the good news with outsiders, with people on the margins, the fringes of society, if you will. The angels shared this good news with those who had been cast aside by polite society, disenfranchised and used for their willingness to do the job that no one else wants to do. The angels shared this good news with the lower rungs of the social ladder, perhaps because they were most open to hearing it, perhaps because they did not have power and prestige to cloud their judgment, perhaps because they are more open to receiving the good news because they were not too preoccupied by social status, by accumulation, by ostentatiousness, by religious observances. The Jewish people at the time had used religion to separate the people away from God, as some churches do today. As outcasts, as those who had experienced exclusion, perhaps the shepherds would be more receptive to a message of inclusion, and perhaps that was why it was offered to them at the time. And then there's believing. Perhaps all of these factors are part of why the shepherds were so quick to believe. After the angels made their proclamation, the shepherds went with haste and found Mary and Joseph and Jesus in the manger. We don't hear that they deliberated it or took a vote. They went with haste. What about their sheep? What about their responsibilities? What about their work, their obligations, their social schedule? They dropped everything to follow the call that God has given them. This was a concern of mine when I received my life-changing calls. What about the life that was? What about all of the concerns and obligations I had? Can I really drop everything and follow where God is leading me? Can I really be that spontaneous? Sometimes God does desire spontaneity. There's an old saying that says, people make plans and God laughs. God's presence breaks into the world often in unexpected ways and unexpected places and runs over the plans that we made. We all know people in our lives who have to overschedule themselves. They have to schedule every minute of their lives with sports practices, with dance lessons, with meetings and activities, so much so that they really don't have time for God. But God breaks into these schedules and throws them out the window. We set our priorities and then God reshuffles them. The shepherds, however, their response was admirable. They just dropped everything and they followed God's call. Their example is a lesson to us all. And finally, we have proclamation. They prophetically proclaimed the good news. They went from that place making known to all what had been told them about this child, and all who heard it were amazed at what the shepherd told them. Even Mary was amazed, and she treasured all these words in her heart. The shepherds didn't keep this wisdom to themselves. They were willing to share it with everyone they met, even though they weren't religious themselves. Even though they weren't well regarded by society, they prophetically shared the good news and transformed the lives of everyone who heard them. Like those phone calls I mentioned earlier, these shepherds had their lives changed forever when they received that message on the hillside. No longer were they simply shepherds. Now they were prophets. So what does it mean to be a prophet? What does it mean to be prophetic? Were these shepherds really prophets? Well, contrary to popular belief, being a prophet has nothing to do with gazing into a crystal ball and seeing the future. Being a prophet is about being visionary enough to see what is, to see the truth, and to be bold enough to tell the truth, even and especially when it is difficult or dangerous to do so. These shepherds have seen the truth with their own eyes, God's word revealed to them through the angelic host on the hillside and in that manger bed. But they could have kept this truth to themselves. They could have gone back to the hillside saying, boy, that was great, but let's not tell anyone about that. We don't want to speak about this because who's going to believe us? But no, they left that manger bed proclaiming the good news for all to hear. They cast caution to the wind, not worried about who would hear or who would believe, but sharing God's news anyway. They didn't care if the religious leaders would dismiss them or penalize them for speaking this way, them being shepherds and all, you know. No, despite the danger, despite the difficulty of their message, they went out and they boldly shared it, and all were amazed at what the shepherds told them. Certainly, they were amazed at the message, I'm sure, but also I'm sure that they were amazed that this message was coming from lowly, lazy shepherds. So as we ponder the prophetic ministry of these lowly shepherds, we see ourselves reflected in them as well. Are we willing to be changed? Are we open to receive? Are we able to believe? Are we willing to proclaim? Receive, believe, and proclaim. And in doing so, your identity is transformed. This is what happened in this story, and this is what we are called to do as well. Now, the story of Jesus has been twisted by incorrect translation and poor theological interpretation over the past 2,000 years. It's easy to receive and believe and proclaim the way it's been watered down by cultural Christianity, by orthodoxy and elitism. Cultural Christianity has drifted very far from the good news that was proclaimed on that hillside that day when the shepherds had their lives forever changed. So when we say we are open to receive, believe, and proclaim, are we really? Are we ready to proclaim the message of Jesus? Are we just ready to proclaim the message of cultural Christianity? Because the message of cultural Christianity proclaimed by so many false prophets out there is very far removed from the message of Jesus. The message of cultural Christianity is one of profit and power and exclusion. The good news of Jesus is much more difficult to hear and much more difficult to proclaim. The good news of Jesus is one of inclusion. It is a message of preferential treatment for the poor, the outcast, the oppressed. The good news of Jesus is liberation from deportation for DACA recipients, undocumented immigrants, those who can't produce proper paperwork for oppressive authorities. The good news of Jesus is health care for all who need it. The good news of Jesus is environmental regulation so all can have clean air and water. The good news of Jesus is an end to the death penalty, the practice of killing people to convince people that it's wrong to kill people. The good news of Jesus is inclusion and affirmation for those who have been oppressed because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. The good news of Jesus is inclusion and affirmation for everyone, including shepherds. The good news of Jesus transforms the hearer, giving them a new identity, reflecting God's presence in their lives. The prophetic message of the shepherds, proclaiming the good news of Jesus despite their station in life, was a difficult and dangerous one. They risked us being ostracized, they risked being penalized, they risked even death in their proclamation. But they received, they believed, and they could not help but proclaim. This was their prophetic call. Today it is ours as well. May we ever live into that prophetic identity. Amen.